Walker, and he is assisted by First Officer Hawkins. Captain Walker has informed me our flight time today will be 5 hours. Their beverages will be complimentary. For a complete listing of the beverages we do offer, you can refer to the magazine.
So with this film, I'm talking about a strange thing. One of the most spectacular criminal cases of the USA. It all started quite harmlessly. I noticed that in the environment of my new computer, there are concepts and angles that I already knew how to connect from others. Multimedia, virtuality, boundary crossing, and revolutions of all kinds. This was also part of the program of the 60s, revolting, avant-garde art, which wanted to solve all the limits between art and life. Change. Now. So, a cocktail of revolt, rock, and pop. Fascinating. The message was, everything is possible. Reality can be altered at will. You are what you want to be.
Gentlemen, it's my pleasure to inform you we're in the very capable hands of Captain Walker, and he is assisted by First Officer Hawkins. Captain Walker has informed me our flight time today will be 5 hours. Their beverages will be complimentary. For a complete listing of the beverages we do offer, you can refer to the magazine.
I would notice how these two worlds touch, computer and art. Why do artists and scientists use their machines in building seemingly similar patterns and concepts? Was there a secret foundation and system? In my research, I met a publisher in New York. John Brockman belongs in the 60s to the New York multimedia scene centered around John Cage, Jonas Mekas, and Andy Warhol. He becomes rich and famous in the 80s when he becomes a business magnate for multimedia art and new technologies. Brockman will be an agent for the books of physicists and gene researchers and computer scientists who market it like pop stars. His publishing company is in the 90s a center of a global network of scientists, artists, and media managers, which he calls Digerati. A cyber elite which connects the successful multimedia, computer, and business together. In 1993, John Brockman's network was hit by a bomb attack. The victim is the computer scientist David Gelernty. After, the FBI arrested the former mathematics professor and graduate of Harvard University, Ted Kaczynski. Why does a mathematician become a terrorist? John Brockman is my first conversation partner. In 1963, he came to New York and started a career as an investment banker.
I was walking through Central Park one day, playing my banjo, and along comes Jonas Mekas with his little 8mm camera, and he starts filming me, and we started to talk. And within a day, I was the new director of the Filmmaker Cinematheque. And I quit my job, And he said he wanted to put together a festival based on cinema but incorporating other arts. And that was the mandate, and he made some suggestions. We thought about it, talked about it, and it was up to me to put it together. And so I called it the Expanded Cinema Festival. And I went to Rauschenberg, Oldenburg, Namjoon Paik, the USCO group, Carolee Schneemann, dancers, artists, poets, audiovisual people, and the only requirement was cinema somehow was incorporated into the piece, just a total rearranging the senses. You didn't know what you were looking at. And all these people were experimenting with media. They were dealing with technological stuff. You know, nobody was talking about cybernetics at the time, but they were all reading McLuhan. Rauschenberg told me about McLuhan, suggested I read it. Then Cage handed me a copy of Cybernetics by Norbert Wiener and said, "This is something for you." Because I was extremely interested in notions of feedback and nonlinearity. I got a call from A.K. Solomon, who was head of biophysics at Harvard, and he had read about the Expanded Cinema Festival. Said, you know, we have all these scientists up here at Harvard and MIT, and a group of us would like to invite a group of artists to spend a couple of days in a seminar, you know, to talk about mutual interests. So I was invited to put this together, which I did. And then they took us to see the computer. There was a room, and everybody there was wearing white coats, and they were cold, and we were cold watching the computer, and all these cards and file cards, and I just stood there like a kid with my nose against the window, and it was so exciting, and I have no idea why. J.Z. Young, an Oxford biologist in Doubt, Uncertainty, and Science, said, we create tools and then we mold ourselves through our use of them. And I read that in like 1964, and something went off. And I suddenly realized that reality isn't this thing in front of us on a proscenium stage. It's a movable feast. We are creating technologies. Then we are the technologies. It's not your heart is like a pump. Your heart is a pump. It's not your brain is like a computer. Your brain is a computer until the next thing comes along. Now you're a neural net, or now you're an information system. And, you know, the circles widened. So there was Heinz von Forster, who was the dean of the world cyberneticists. There was Gregory Bateson, Stuart Brand. Almost all these people were authors, as I was. I'd read all their books. And no one in New York had a clue that there was something happening, that there was a consciousness or mindset that had evolved, and you could connect all these people. Like, you can connect this and this. You know, there are ways to put it together and to see a cohesive whole, and they were best-selling authors, and they were getting screwed by the publishing industry. So I was dragooned into becoming an agent because I had a business background, and they said, why don't you just go back and look after our interests? It'll take you an hour a day. And I thought it would be a nice way to pick up some money while I wrote books. And I found out very quickly that I was sitting on an oil well and I couldn't control. And that was 30 years ago.
In 1993, someone attacked your network. We talked about your network, and David Gelernter, one of your fabulous writers, received a letter bomb from the Unabomber.
Right.
Why do you think he was a target?
Well, I know he was a target. This madman, criminal madman, would read the New York Times, and a lot of the people he picked as targets were people that John Markoff had profiled. So Galernta was the subject of one of the biggest profiles ever in the Times in 1991, and I'm sure that had something to do with it.
But the Unabomber, he studied in Harvard, and he was a mathematician.
Yeah, and he's a sick criminal. I wouldn't have a serious discussion about this guy. You know, he doesn't rise to the level. I think he's a guy that wrote this manifesto that he couldn't possibly get published because it's written so badly and it's so flawed. So in order to get it published, he killed people. End of story. People can have arguments about environment and science, but you don't need to kill people to make your point. And I wouldn't dignify him by discussing him any further. Let's change the subject.
So call a car.
John Brockman's reaction to my question about Ted Kaczynski surprises me. What is this manifesto that he mentions? Between 1978 and 1995, there are a series of bomb attacks in the U.S. 3 people die and 23 are sometimes severely injured. The targets of the bombs are the bosses of large airlines and scientists of various elite universities. The head of the FBI is looking out for an intelligent individual who is given the code name Unabomber, the computer shortcut for universities and airlines. In 1996, the New York Times and the Washington Post received letters in which a so-called terror group, FC, an abbreviation for Freedom Club, demands the publication of a manifesto and offers the stopping of the attacks. With the approval of the FBI, on August 2, 1995, the pre-printing of the 56-page manifesto appears and leads to the arrest of the mathematician Ted Kaczynski. His brother David recognizes parts of the lectures as quotes of his brother Ted, and of course, on the threat of his wife, calls the FBI. Then in 1996, the FBI arrested Ted Kaczynski in the wilderness of Montana, where he lived in a self-built hut for 25 years. My next partner is John Brockman's friend and client, Stuart Brand. We meet in Sausalito, a former fisherman village near San Francisco. Stuart Brand belongs in the 60s to a scene of hippies and artists who live on a houseboat settlement on the edge of the Sausalitos. A central figure of this scene is the writer Ken Kesey. In 1960, he was one of the student trial candidates which the American government was testing on with LSD. Later, he was with musical theater group, the Merry Pranksters, on the road to proselytize for LSD and other drugs with so-called acid tests, which transform the consciousness into an open system, an alternative form of cybernetics. Stuart Brand was one of these alternative cyberneticists and still has a small office and studio in the Sausalitos. Brand is the inventor of the term personal computer, and in the 60s, he was the publisher of the Whole Earth Catalog, an alternative catalog for life. In the 80s, he installed on a houseboat in Sausalito the first alternative computer network in the world, The Well. In the 90s, he was a consultant for the California computer industry. How do computers, LSD, and hippies come together?
In 1960 and 61, I was a lieutenant in the U.S. Army, based at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And on weekends when I could get away, I went to the Lower East Side of New York and hung out with artists, because by then I'd been hanging out with artists in San Francisco in 1959 and 60. John Brockman was part of that, a fellow named Steve Durkee, a poet named Gerd Stern, a group of artists and engineers called USCO was taking shape about then, standing for Us Company. The mechanism of meeting Ken Kesey was very straightforward. It was through Indians. By chance, I was a photojournalist then, and I got a job through a friend photographing Indians in Oregon at the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. So I photographed these guys, and I thought, this is a real interesting, different America that I didn't know about, that is fundamental and profound. And then Kesey's book came out, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which had a character in it named Chief Broom. And Chief Broom was portrayed as an Indian from the reservation where I'd been working. So I was moved by that, and it sort of gave me the rest of the permission to think what I was thinking, that Indians were important. And so I sent Kesey photographs through a mutual friend. I knew his address that I'd taken, and he basically sent back a note, come on down. And was welcomed right in and blended in and became part of it.
We're on our way to LA.
We'll have to all get together on one plan of attack.
How are we coming in? Is everybody
Which,
coming
at this
in
time
everywhere?
is
You're going to have to all be coming everywhere.
But the Intrepid Trips production at the moment is the acid test.
Okay, once again, the train is in.
Being on the bus, going from acid test to acid test, basically, which was Kesey's form of performance art, using our band was a group called the Warlocks, which later became the Grateful Dead. A number of people around the group were ex-Army like I was. A number of them were artists. And it was intensely improvisational.
Come on now. Get some power up here on the stage.
Our best technicians are now on the problem.
All right, turn up the microphone.
Sounds dead.
Was it a moving laboratory? Yes. In Kesey's mind, it was a moving laboratory. He said, these scientists talk about doing research, and that's really all they're doing is research. We're doing search. And if we don't boil rocks and drink the water, how do we know it won't make us drunk? And what we do is boil rocks. In other words, try any damn thing. And some of them were pretty interesting experiments. One, for example, would be take a whole bunch of people sitting around, basically stoned, 15 people. Take a bunch of garden hose and cut it up into 8 or 10 foot lengths, tie it all together in a knot, grab two pieces, talking to one and listen to the other. And everybody's doing this. And so you know who you're hearing, but you don't know who you're talking to. And this is happening in a group of 15 people, just to see what happens. That was search. The Whole Earth Catalog project certainly had all of that frame of reference, but it specifically came out of an LSD afternoon where I was on a rooftop with probably 200 micrograms of LSD in me, nothing better to do, and thinking about, or in context of lectures I had recently heard by Buckminster Fuller, and Fuller, like McLuhan, was one of the people we were paying attention to then. And Wiener was in there, Cage was a little bit in there. For the initial audience, in my mind, was communes, was people who were trying to reinvent civilization, and I was just trying to provide the tools with which to reinvent civilization. And turned out a lot of people were interested in that. The communes that try to, quote, go back to basics and just farm, made a real good try at doing that. And some of them even learned a fair amount of serious farming. A book that we purveyed in the Whole Earth Catalog called Goat Husbandry was a very popular book. And it's a good book. You get the book, get a goat, you can do it. Milk and everything. But it didn't play out very far. It was basically a different kind of dead end from what drugs were. Whereas some of the technology, some of the alternative energy technology showed real promise. Solar energy basically took off gradually and takes off to this day. Computer technology, obviously. And because the counterculture hippie frame of reference was there for outlaws of all kinds, it basically swept right through the outlaw computer people, the hackers, and became their frame of reference in a kind of a gift economy optimistic approach, became then the basis for personal computer software, then the internet and the web, and on and on. And that's the main legacy from the 60s, as far as I'm concerned, is the open system approach to everything having to do with computers.
Stuart, you offered 2 lines in the catalog. How to use a computer and how to build a cabin in the woods like Thoreau, one of the American icons. On one side you offered technology and on the other side anti-technology in one book.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Was there a discussion about that among the users of the catalog, or was it a conflict? What was your position in this time?
We came down on one side of the conflict between technology and anti-technology. We came down on the side of technology, basically on the theory of the way to make a technology work for you is just grab it and run with it and go do whatever you want with that technology. And if that happens and everybody does that and these technologies basically get democratized, then they will work out okay. If you fail to do that and just say they're very, very evil and I will never touch them, then they have complete freedom to be as evil as they want. You know who wound up in Thoreau's cabin was the Unabomber, was Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah.
Saying this is evil, 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 and I'll prove it by killing some of the people who do it. And then, that line then leads to Bill Joy saying, Ted Kaczynski is right about a few things. You read his stuff and there's some sensible critique in there that we need to take seriously because, what if we democratize weapons of mass destruction? Is that a good thing? It was okay to democratize personal computers and the internet, but what about weapons of mass destruction? It's a fair question. And that's one that we're now dealing with in the early 21st century. I think it will eventually sort out, but it's a real question. Well, he was saying the culture is going a whole direction here, and I think it's a dangerous direction, and I will personally prevent it from going there. And he got heard by vile means, but he got heard.
The Industrial Society and Its Future by F.C. The consequences of the Industrial Revolution are a catastrophe for humanity. That's why we're fighting for a revolution against the technological system. In terms of scientific and technical progress, the freedom of the individual will be destroyed. There will soon be no place where an individual can hide himself in front of the surveillance by supercomputers and consciousness control. It would be hopeless to attack the system without setting up modern technology itself. We all have to use the media to spread our message. Nature is the opposite of technology and the perfect alternative to this system. The sooner this system collapses, the better off for humanity. Florence, Colorado, February 28th. Dear Mr. Dambeck, thank you very much for your letter and questions that I will try to answer. I use this opportunity to improve my knowledge of the German language. I am not a scientist. 30 years ago, I was a mathematician, but I have forgotten the greatest part of what I knew about mathematics. I think that utopias are crazy and dangerous, especially those of a technological society. Technology is a very unique and extremely dangerous power who leads us there, where it must inevitably lead us. This is neither by accident nor by the will of arrogant bureaucrats, politicians, or scientists, but the technological system simply has to adapt human behavior to its own requirements. This is necessary so that it can function and can continue to stand out. They also ask me a lot about the manifesto. All published versions of the manifesto are incorrect because they contain serious mistakes. If you want a proper version of the manifesto, I can deliver it to you. You can also write to me in German. How does a utopia emerge? Are there one or several inventors? Or is there a plan? At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the elite of American and international engineers and scientists will be trained. MIT is also a guide for a close partnership between the military and other universities. This cooperation begins in the First World War and is moving forward in the Second, where technology is crucial. On August 13, 1940, the German Air Force begins the Battle of Britain. Shortly after the German attacks, the 1886 in Chicago-born mathematician and physicist Norbert Wiener offered his knowledge for the defense struggle against fascism. Wiener teaches at MIT as a professor for mathematics and has already dealt with questions of ballistics and artillery in the First World War. How can you build a machine that calculates the movements of warplanes in advance, so to be able to fire at them? Wiener has to take care of the essence of the technological war, where people, ships, and airplanes are only more abstract, white dots and signs on the radar screen. The pilot mixes with his machine, blurring the limit between human and machine, and there is now an anonymous mechanized object whose actions are now being modeled and calculated in the war laboratories. Although Wiener's machines are not usable until the end of the war, he develops the model of a new science that is known as cybernetics. The new science of cybernetics deals with the question of how information transmission works in machines and living beings. The basis of cybernetics is the assumption that the human nervous system does not form reality, but calculates it. The human now appears to be an information processing system, thinking of data, computation, and the brain as a meat machine. The brain is no longer the place where ego and identity are formed by memory and consciousness. It is now a machine that consists of switching and control circuits, feedback loops, and communication nodes. A black box in which cause is effect, and the effect is the cause within an infinite cycle. A closed feedback system with inputs and outputs which you can control and calculate. It is no longer the way it used to be from a natural perspective, but from unimaginable mathematics and logic. Wiener's future vision of a future cybernetic society now provides the scientific legitimation for the new political and military status of the United States as a superpower. Cybernetics is the new global science of suffering, which will continue to develop under changing labels. From a theory, a worldwide practice is carried out. Florence, March 6. Because I have a little more time now, I put my answer to your letter. You ask, how should a non-technological society look like? Well, when all modern technology is completed, we only know that there is no biotechnology, no computer, no atomic bombs, and so on. Do we stay with what is practical and concrete? Do you feel, when people live in a virtual world, that when machines are more clever than people, that people, animals, and plants are future products of technology? If you don't like it, it is obviously dangerous for you, the computer and bio-knowledge. It is very simple, and it is not about morality, about the incomprehensibility of the sentence of Gödel or other abstract philosophical questions. You have offered something to send. which makes me happy. I like to accept this offer. My German dictionary is small, bad, and dull. It would make me very happy if I received a good German-English dictionary, but they are not allowed to send anything with a hardcover.
With the Cold War, with World War II over, and now us turning our attentions to the Russians, we needed various ways to, one, literally protect our skies, and two, to give the people of the U.S. Sort of a feeling of security. And that's where SAGE came in. SAGE is the largest computer ever made, and this is only one portion, and all of this is another portion. And we have less than 10% of one SAGE machine. First wide-scale use of modems was on this machine. And how it worked was you'd actually see a blip on the screen that was moving, and you would access that blip with a light gun by actually clicking on it. And if there was any information in air traffic control, it would show up in one area. But if not, the intercept technician would have to have it shot down. And you can see the large screen here. And first wide-scale use of modems, it was a decentralized network. So if a bomb was to take out one of them, you could still control the output and the inputs from another station. So it was very influential in the early days of the ARPANET, with a lot of the whole concept of, being able to keep the network running if you lose one of the nodes. Indicate what was coming, and then you could scramble jets or even launch missiles from the ground. You also see that you have the ability to dial up other sectors and control their airspace also. And if you wanted to zoom in and just deal with a specific division, and then you could access that, and it actually would give you a full screen of that. Very, very advanced system. You can see you have standby, off power, or you can just keep the cooling to it at any time. You also had a cigarette lighter and an ashtray, so if you were smoking, you could keep them going insane.
Back to Ted Kaczynski. In 1958, as a 16-year-old with an IQ of 170, he started his mathematics study at Harvard University. In 1967, he became a professor of mathematics at the University of Berkeley. Why does Ted Kaczynski land in the camp of technology opponents, and is not instead an enthusiastic computer hippie like Stuart Brand or John Brockman? Where does his fear of computers and psychological control techniques come from? How do they develop in the secret laboratories of the U.S. Army in these years? How do individual computers develop into worldwide computer networks? At the end of the 1960s, the former NASA engineer Robert Taylor worked on this task. Taylor belongs to the young engineers and scientists who are impressed by Norbert Wiener's cybernetics and the first computers. From NASA, the rocket specialist soon became a science manager in the Pentagon. At the Pentagon, he can decide how much money the laboratories of universities, companies, or individual scientists get from the Defense Ministry for their research projects. He decides who is involved and who is not. The ARPANET, developed in the 1970s, is the form of today's Internet and all communication networks for the fully electronic battlefield of the present.
ARPA was founded in 1957, or maybe 58, as a result of Sputnik. Sputnik occurred in October of 57, and it greatly surprised the United States. They had no idea. In 58, very soon after Sputnik, Eisenhower, who was president then, asked the Department of Defense to set up a special agency called ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, to look for research projects that had a longer-term expectation associated with it, so in the hopes that we would not get surprised again, like the Russians surprised us. So the initial ARPA programs were all space-related, not computer research, by and large. Then in 1960, NASA was formed, and by Kennedy. And the ARPA space programs were all transferred to NASA. That left ARPA, by 61, 62, it left ARPA an opportunity to do some other things. And one of the things they decided to get into was computer research. For my office in ARPA, and for some of the other offices in ARPA, the policy was go find people with really big ideas that you think might work, and if they do work, the payoff will be very large.
And then there were people, labs, offices, and companies.
Yes.
And how?
And I was supporting.
Can it work? Can you draw for me? How exists then a network?
Okay, so this group here has its own computer, and this group has its own computer, and this group, and so on. But these computers cannot talk, communicate with one another unless you put a little translator next to each one of these. So this computer's sending something over here, it goes through this translator. The translator translates this language, if you will, or these bits, into a common language that he can understand and he can understand, but he can't and he can't. And so the translation goes through here, it comes here. This guy then translates this stuff into something that this guy can then receive. And the same is true over here, and over here, and even over here, so that everything is sort of multiple connected. But some historians have looked at this and said, well, the reason that ARPA built the ARPANET was in the case of nuclear disaster. No, that's not the reason we built the ARPANET. We built the ARPANET to enable people in different places who had common interest to share those interests. The internet is simply an evolution of the ARPANET, both in philosophy and in technology. All that took place from over the period 1971 to 1976 or so. And we had the first internet up and running in 75 or 6 when we put the Ethernet and the ARPANET together. So those were good years. There was a lot to do, and it was obvious what to do. And there was, and all these different things had to fit together nicely. They had to work together. So that was a lot of fun.
Robert, for you it was a lot of fun, but other people were afraid of these growing networks. For them it seemed like cancer or a machine which we perhaps couldn't control. What do you think about such critics like Ted Kaczynski?
He's crazy. We have people like that in our society.
But he was a mathematician. He studied in Harvard.
Yeah. Hitler was an artist. He studied in Vienna.
Did you read the manifesto?
You mean Mein Kampf?
No, the manifesto by the Unabomber.
No, I didn't read it. I didn't read Mein Kampf either. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of, well, I'm afraid of the Al-Qaeda. I'm afraid of cancer. But I don't know enough. If we knew how to cure cancer, if we had more knowledge, in other words, about cancer, then we wouldn't be afraid of it.
But you know cancer is an illness, Krankheit? An illness?
Yes.
Is an illness of the modern society, is an illness of the civilization.
Yeah, but someday, I believe, we will understand how to cure cancer or prohibit cancer. I believe that will happen long before we have an electronic battlefield or a machine that we can't control. And when we know how to cure or prohibit cancer, we will no longer be afraid of it. It's a question of knowledge, of eliminating ignorance. Ignorance is a state of no knowledge. Ignorance. It's not stupidity. That's something else. Ignorance causes fear.
What have I got so far? I have a former mathematician, but no interview partner who wants to talk about his system critique. And I have engineers and artists who are possessed by technology. This obviously belongs to a system whose contours I only now am seeing. It seems a brilliant feedback system that every attack and every disturbance is used as an energy source for its further perfection. Who needs something like that? Who thinks of something like that? Between 1946 in 1953 in the New York Beekman Hotel at the invitation of the Joshua Macy Foundation. Meet scientists who lead various fields of expertise, among others, Norbert Wiener, Margaret Mead, Gregory Bateson, Kurt Levine, and John von Neumann. Many of these later Macy conferences, known as trust meetings, on which representatives of the CIA take part, is a science that produces premonition and control of human behavior. This is a weapon that America needs urgently in the Cold War, the new battlefield of the subconscious. This is why the Macy Group registered interest in The Authoritative Personality, a paper by the International Institute of Social Research, a new foundation of the Frankfurt Institute for Social Research of Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno. The study is the most comprehensive social profile of America as a society, and should provide a scientific explanation for religious and racist prejudices. Out of thousands of interviews, a huge data collection is created that is evaluated by the most modern computer and aims to give everyone an answer to one question. How do people react to authoritarian behavior as a mass phenomenon? The authors see the origin in the authoritarian matrix of the human being, which offers the key to the psychology of fascism and totalitarian systems at all. The matrix is formed by education and tradition, and it seems to have an unresolvable connection with the metaphysical idea of a supernaturally created nature. How could one express the human potential for fascism and racism, especially against Jews? The sociologists construct a scale for measuring the fascist potential, the so-called F scale. For example, the tests of the American psychologist Henry A. Murray, one of the fathers of today's assessment centers, in which patients undergo the latest psychological processes until hidden tendencies of personality are felt. To prevent fascism and anti-Semitism, it seems necessary to change the nature of people and their cultural patterns so that this authoritarian matrix would disappear forever. How can it be changed without bloodshed and without surgery, deep in the personality and the awareness of people? According to the psychologist Kurt Levine, a member of the Macy Group, the old values and equal weights must first be destroyed to make the relationship liquid. Then new equal weights and values can be established. These must then be permanently regulated by self-regulation, and re-education should then develop onto self-re-education. This will transform the world into a post-national, multi-ethnic world society without fixed borders. Macy Group believes it can offer the necessary tools and construction plans for this new world order. New and faster computer machines and cyber model worlds with which all areas of science, culture, and politics appear controllable. This also promises the programming of new people, of anti-authoritarian people that are made to measure. Florence, March 15. In your last letter, you asked me so many questions that I can't answer them all at once. When I wrote to you that the concept of utopia is insane and dangerous, I didn't mean that all utopias are insane and dangerous, but above all, the utopia that makes possible the creation of a society according to a certain ideal pattern. You yourself has doubtlessly your own idea of a utopia. Another person has another idea that can be very different from your own. Would you like him to force his utopia on you? Do you have the right to force your utopia on him? I would like to answer more of these and other questions, but some difficult problems have been raised that I am worried about. That's why I will end the letter here. Later, I will write more of them.